I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask a single question when the HOA's lawyer slid that crisp white eviction notice across the table. Instead, I reached slowly into my folder and pushed a yellow document back toward him. The original 1923 water rights deed signed in my great-grandfather's hand. His smug expression faltered just slightly, and that was enough to steady my resolve. The paper in his hand was official, cold, unyielding. But the paper in mine? It was history. It was blood. It was 47 acres of Texas soil that had been carved, cared for, and defended by my family for 3 generations. And yet, here I was being told to leave my own land. They thought I was just another name on a list, another obstacle to be bulldozed in the name of suburban progress. I walked out of that meeting without saying a word, but my silence was not surrender. It was strategy. Outside, I stood on the gravel drive and stared down at the dust curling in the hot August wind. Beyond the hill, I could already see the rooftops of houses rising where my grandfather's cattle once grazed. 35 cookie-cutter homes, each sitting proudly on land that didn't belong to them. The Willowbrook Estates HOA had swaggered into my absence like bandits. They thought deployment meant abandonment. That 2 tours in Afghanistan had cost me not just time with my family, but also my claim to my grandfather's gift. They underestimated me. They underestimated Pops. And most of all, they underestimated the quiet little dam tucked to the edge of my property. The one they thought was nothing more than a pond. That eviction notice was supposed to break me, but instead it lit a fuse. I wasn't just fighting for dirt and grass. I was fighting for the water, the legacy, and the promise Pops had left behind. Their legal papers, their golf carts, their fake smiles, none of it could erase what was written in those records or what flowed beneath the surface of that dam. I folded the eviction notice once, tucked it into my jacket pocket, and whispered to myself, "You built your homes on my land. Now let's see how well they stand when the water remembers where it belongs." The land was never just dirt to us. It was memory, sweat, and family stitched into every acre. My grandfather, Pops, bought it back in 1955, long before Austin became a booming city. Back then, the roads were little more than dusty trails, and neighbors were separated by miles, not fences. He used to say, "This land is stubborn, boy, but if you respect it, it'll take care of you." I grew up believing that. I remember the smell of mesquite smoke rising from his old barbecue pit, the sound of cattle bells clinking as a herd wandered near the creek, and the crunch of gravel under Pop's boots when he'd walk me down to the dam. He built that dam himself in 1978 with help from the Army Corps of Engineers. Not some flashy, concrete monstrosity, but a sturdy earthwork designed to collect rainwater, store it, and release it slowly when drought came. It wasn't just for us. It was for everyone downstream. Pops believed water was meant to be shared. That little dam became the heartbeat of the land. During dry summers, farmers would come with barrels, filling them to keep their gardens alive. During floods, Pops adjusted the spillway, protecting homes and crops. He never asked for payment. He just asked for respect. To him, stewardship was more important than profit. Every year when the rains came, we'd stand by the dam and watch the water rise, like a reminder that nature could be both fierce and generous. For me, the land was more than a home. It was a training ground. I learned to hunt deer in those rolling hills, learned patience by waiting quietly with Pops under the oak tree, and learned responsibility by fixing fences when storms knocked them down. Every memory was stitched into that soil. Then life pulled me away. The Army called, and I went 2 tours in Afghanistan, where I specialized in water management and infrastructure. Funny thing, half a world away in a desert, I was doing the same work Pops had taught me, protecting water, distributing it fairly, making sure communities survived. I learned how vital it was, how wars could erupt over a single well, and I carried that lesson back home. But while I was gone, Pops passed away. My sister Sarah, bless her heart, tried to manage things from California. She didn't know land law, didn't know Texas politics, and certainly didn't know the kind of predators who circle when they smell opportunity. She hired a property management company to keep up with taxes and maintenance, but they were more interested in paperwork than protection. That's when the vultures, the HOA, moved in. When I came back in 2023, ready to settle down and finally live on Pop's land. I didn't find the pastures I remembered. I didn't hear the cattle or the sound of water trickling through the creek. Instead, I saw survey stakes, bulldozers, and strangers pouring concrete on the back 40. My land, Pop's legacy. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a legal fight. This was personal. Her name was Margaret Thornwell, but everyone called her Maggie. 52 years old, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, and the kind of woman who wore tennis skirts like they were business suits. You could smell her perfume before you saw her, a sugary sweetness that couldn't quite mask the stale smoke of entitlement that clung to her every word. She was the kind of person who smiled at you while rearranging the knife she was about to slip into your back. Maggie's power didn't come from charm. It came from leverage. She was married to Rick Thornwell, a city councilman with a gift for zoning loopholes and backroom deals. Together, they were a machine. Rick changed the laws, Maggie enforced them with HOA rules, and both profited while pretending to serve the community. To outsiders, she was a model neighbor. To me, she was the queen of stolen land. I first met her in person the day I confronted construction crew. Dust rose as their bulldozer clawed at the soil near Pop's Dam, ripping up decades of grass roots like they were nothing. I stormed over, heart pounding, demanding to know what gave them the right to trespass. The foreman barely looked at me as he shrugged and said, "Sorry, buddy, we got permits. This is Willowbrook Estates property now." Before I could respond, the hum of a golf cart drew my attention. There she was, Maggie, perched behind the wheel like a general surveying her troops. She parked at the edge of the churned-up earth, stepped out gracefully, and offered me a smile so polished it could have been used in a toothpaste commercial. "Your family abandoned this land, honey," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "We're just putting it to good use of the community." I clenched my fists. Abandoned? My grandfather built that dam to feed half this valley. I bled for this country while you were pouring concrete into my pasture. And you dare call that abandonment? Her smile never wavered, but her eyes glinted with steel. "You should have stayed closer to home, soldier boy. We followed the law. You didn't. That makes this ours now." That was Maggie's specialty, turning morality upside down and making theft sound like civic duty. She wasn't just stealing land. She was rewriting the story, framing herself as a savior of forgotten property while painting me as the unstable veteran threatening her perfect suburban paradise. I learned quickly that she thrived on image. Every time she spoke, she played to an invisible audience, neighbors, reporters, council members. She knew how to cry on cue, how to turn her head just enough to make it look like the sun was shining on her hair, how to lace her words with community and safety until you forgot she was describing outright theft. And her reach was terrifying. Citations appeared in my mailbox for unsightly structures on my farmhouse, a building that had stood since 1962. Loud music complaints rolled in even when my radio was off. One week, animal control showed up demanding papers for livestock I didn't even own anymore. Each move was small, petty, but together they created a storm meant to wear me down. But what made Maggie truly dangerous wasn't just her harassment. It was her confidence. She thought she'd already won. She thought her paperwork, her city council husband, and her polished smile had stripped me of every weapon I had. She thought I'd fold like the neighbors before me, sell cheap and disappear. What she didn't know was that Pops hadn't just left me land. He'd left me water. And water, unlike paper, always finds its way home. The first time I fought back, I thought the law would protect me. That was my mistake. I hired a local attorney, one of those polished types with expensive suits and glossy brochures promising justice. He sat across from me, nodding sympathetically, while casually quoting me $85,000 just to file the initial challenge against the HOA's zoning changes. $85,000 for paperwork. His advice? Take their offer, son. You'll never win against city council connections. That's when I realized the courtroom wasn't just slow. It was rigged. While I scraped together a plan, Maggie's machine kept rolling forward. Her husband Rick fast-tracked an emergency zoning modification through the council, magically transforming my family's agricultural land into residential development property overnight. One signature, one late-night vote, and decades of stewardship vanished under fluorescent lights and political handshakes. By the time I filed an appeal, they already had foundations being poured. Every day I drove past those trucks, watching my pasture turn into sidewalks. The smell of wet concrete hung in the air, smothering the scent of cedar and mesquite. Each hammer strike echoed in my chest like a countdown clock. But it wasn't just construction, it was theft in slow motion. I discovered that Maggie's crews had quietly diverted the creek that fed Pop's Dam. What had once been a steady trickle dwindled to a thin line of mud. Every morning, I checked the water level, watching it drop inch by inch, like watching Pop's legacy bleed out before my eyes. 45 years of careful water management, drying up in weeks. When I confronted the foreman again, he just smirked. Not our problem. HOA approved it. My stomach churned. They weren't just stealing land. They were choking the lifeblood of everything my grandfather built. And then came the smear campaign. Maggie was too smart to mention my name directly, but she didn't need to. On neighborhood apps and HOA newsletters, whisper spread. Aggressive property disputes nearby. Unstable veteran causing trouble. One night, the local news even ran a segment where Maggie, crocodile tears glistening under the cameras, warned about dangerous dam structures threatening innocent families downstream. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, clutching her pearls like she was auditioning for sainthood. I sat in my farmhouse, fists clenched, as the anchor repeated her words. Unstable, dangerous, a threat to community. They painted me as a ticking time bomb, a soldier who brought the war home. And the worst part? It worked. Neighbors stopped waving when they drove past. At the diner, conversations went quiet when I walked in. Even Sarah, calling from California, begged me to just take the money and let it go. It's not worth it, Jake. You can't fight people like them. But she didn't see what I saw. She didn't smell the diesel exhaust of bulldozers carving scars into our land. She didn't hear the crunch of gravel under strange boots where Pops and I once walked. She didn't taste the bitterness of courthouse coffee while flipping through records that proved just how deep Maggie's corruption ran. On paper, I was losing. Every headline, every council vote, every poured foundation screamed defeat. But beneath the paper trail, beneath the concrete, there was something they couldn't touch: water. And I was about to remind them that water always writes its own story. When the lawyers failed me and the city council shut their doors, I did what any soldier would do. I went looking for intel. Wars aren't always won with bullets. They're won with information. And I knew Pops, old and stubborn as he was, would have left me something buried in the paperwork. The courthouse smelled of dust and mildew, the kind of place where forgotten truths wait quietly for someone stubborn enough to find them. I spent hours hunched over faded folders, flipping through tax records, zoning maps, and permits so old the ink had nearly vanished. Most of it was bureaucratic junk. But then one afternoon, my fingers brushed across a thick envelope marked 1978, dam construction permits. I opened it slowly, heart pounding. Inside were the original Army Corps of Engineers documents, stamped and signed, detailing every inch of Pop's Dam. My breath caught when I read the line. Designed for agricultural water management and flood control under federal jurisdiction. Federal jurisdiction. That phrase hit me like a lightning strike. Suddenly, Maggie's smug HOA votes and Rick's shady rezoning didn't mean a damn thing. Because this wasn't just county property anymore, it was federal. And no HOA, no city council, no smirking foreman could override federal jurisdiction. But the real treasure came a week later. While digging through yet another pile of miscellaneous deeds, I found a brittle parchment folded in thirds. The year stamped on top made me blink. 1923. My great-grandfather's name scrawled across the bottom confirmed it. He had purchased senior water rights to the entire Willow Creek watershed. Senior water rights. Older than the city. Older than the county's municipal water system. Older than every McMansion Maggie had dared to build on my land. My great-grandfather had locked down ownership of the water itself, not just the soil around it, which meant every drop flowing through that creek, every gallon held by Pop's Dam, every trickle diverted to those half-built houses, belonged to me. I sat there in the courthouse, paper trembling in my hands, and for the first time since this war began, I felt something like hope. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had underestimated Pops. He'd built the dam with foresight, partnered with the Corps for protection, and secured water rights long before anyone dreamed a suburb here. I drove back to the farmhouse that night with those documents locked in my glove box like contraband gold. Outside, the August sky was heavy with storm clouds, and for the first time in weeks, the smell of rain filled the air. I stood on the porch, staring at Pop's dam, and whispered, "You planned for this, didn't you?" But victory on paper wasn't enough. Maggie had her weapons: smear campaigns, harassment, intimidation, and she wasn't about to stop. The next morning, I found fresh tire tracks near the dam, as if someone had been snooping around. My trail cameras confirmed it. Men in tactical vests, hired security, tried to mess with the spillway controls. They didn't know I'd already serviced the gates, cleaned the hydraulics, and reinforced the structure. That dam wasn't some relic. It was alive, ready, waiting. And now, so was I. That night, I laid the documents across my kitchen table like battle maps. Federal dam permits, water rights deed, Pop's journals, filled with notes about seasonal flooding and helping neighbors during dry years. Together, they formed something stronger than Maggie's lies. They formed truth, and truth, once exposed, could drown even the most carefully built empire. I realized then this fight wasn't just about me. It wasn't about one farmhouse, or even 47 acres. It was about every farmer downstream who'd lost water, every neighbor Maggie had bullied, every family pushed off their land by zoning tricks and legal intimidation. I didn't just have weapons. I had allies waiting. They just didn't know it yet. And as I stare at Pop's dam under the storm-heavy sky, I made myself a promise. The next time those gates opened, it wouldn't be for cattle or crops. It would be for justice. The more ground I gained, the more desperate Maggie became. She couldn't fight me on water rights. She didn't even know I had that ace up my sleeve yet, but she could bury me under harassment. And that's exactly what she tried to do. It started with the so-called safety patrol. 3 HOA board members in matching polo shirts parked their SUVs at the entrance of my property like they were manning a military checkpoint. Every visitor got photographed. Every license plate was scribbled in their little notepads. My mail began arriving late. My guests stopped coming altogether. No one wanted to deal with the suburban surveillance brigade. Then came the inspectors. One Monday morning, I woke up to find a caravan of official trucks lining my driveway. Building inspector, fire marshal, health department, even animal control. They swarmed my property like it was a crime scene. The building inspector, who, not so coincidentally, played golf with Rick every Friday, declared my porch unsafe, demanding $8,000 in foundation work. The fire marshal said my wiring was outdated. Animal control claimed my dogs weren't registered, even though their tags jingled right on their collars. It was death by paperwork, $1,000 bleed one violation at a time. They weren't trying to fix problems. They were trying to exhaust me until I gave up. Mag, of course, orchestrated it all with her trademark sugar-coated venom. On the neighborhood app, she posted about concerning activity and uncooperative neighbors. She never used my name, but she didn't need to. Everyone in Willowbrook knew who the unstable veteran with a dangerous dam was supposed to be. One evening, as I sat on my porch, the glow of headlights pulled into my driveway. A city social worker stepped out, clipboard in hand, apologetic look on her face. "Mr. Morrison, we received a wellness check request. Concerned neighbors think you might be struggling with adjustment issues." Behind her, I spotted Maggie parked in her golf cart, watching like a vulture. That one stung more than all the citations combined. They weren't just attacking my property anymore. They were attacking me, my service, my sanity, my honor. But here's the thing about harassment campaigns. They reveal allies just as fast as they reveal enemies. Mrs. Chun, my elderly neighbor, started leaving baskets of food on my porch, whispering that her family garden had dried up since the creek diversion. Miguel Santos, a farmer a mile downstream, knocked on my door one night with maps and records showing his irrigation pond shrinking. He'd fought the HOA before and lost, but when he saw the documents I had, hope flickered in his eyes. Piece by piece, the community Maggie thought she controlled began to fracture. Some neighbors still believe her narrative, but others started asking questions. Why was the creek dry? Why were inspectors only targeting one farmhouse? Why was the HOA building on land that didn't belong to them? I kept documenting everything: photos, videos, flow measurements. My trail cameras captured crews sneaking onto my property at night, fiddling with survey markers. I logged every interaction, time-stamped every conversation. Each folder of evidence grew thicker, each entry a nail in the coffin Maggie was building for herself. She thought intimidation would break me. What she didn't realize was that all she was doing was training me to fight smarter, harder, and with allies by my side. And with every petty fine, every stage wellness check, every HOA patrol blocking my gate, I became more certain of one thing. The day was coming when that dam would speak louder than Maggie ever could. When you've been a soldier, you learn something important. You don't charge into battle blind. You plan, you prepare, and you wait for the right moment to strike. That's exactly how I approached Maggie and her HOA empire. The first call I made was to an old army buddy, Tony Riggs. Back in Afghanistan, Tony and I had built wells in villages where a few gallons of clean water meant the difference between life and death. These days, Tony worked for the EPA's Enforcement Division. When I told him about the creek diversion and the shrinking dam, he whistled low. "Jake, if they're redirecting a natural waterway without federal permits, that's a Clean Water Act violation. And if your dam has federal jurisdiction, that's not just a zoning issue, that's federal enforcement." 20 minutes on the phone with Tony taught me more than 3 hours with my overpriced lawyer. And it gave me a new weapon: federal oversight. The second call I made was to Amanda Cross, a young environmental lawyer I'd met through a veteran support group. She specialized in pro bono water rights cases and had a reputation for being relentless in court. When I laid out my evidence, the dam permits, the water rights deed, the trail cam photos, her voice sharpened. "This isn't just a civil dispute, Jake. This is insurance fraud, environmental violation, and potentially racketeering. You got them pinned. They just don't know it yet." Together, we began piecing together a plan. Not a legal plan. Not yet. A tactical plan. Step one was evidence. I documented everything with military precision. Time-stamped photos of the creek diversion, flow measurements at 3 separate points, drone footage of construction encroaching on the floodplain. Miguel Santos brought decades of records showing his family's reliance on Willow Creek for farming. Mrs. Chung contributed black and white photos of her grandfather's garden from the 1940s, lush and thriving on water that was now gone. Every piece became part of a larger puzzle, proof that the HOA had stolen not just my land, but the community's lifeline. Step 2 was allies. The more I dug, the more I realized Maggie and Rick's schemes had left a trail of broken families. Miguel's farm had nearly gone under. Mrs. Chen's garden was dying. 3 other families had been forced out by zoning changes Rick conveniently pushed through. Alone, they were just victims. Together, we were a coalition. Step 3 was timing. The weather forecast predicted heavy rains in September, the kind that tested dams and overflow channels. That was my cover. With Tony's EPA badge, Amanda's legal filings, and storm clouds on my side, we could stage a demonstration of the dam's natural flood management system. Not an attack, not revenge, just the creek returning to its rightful course, in full view of federal investigators. But I knew Maggie wouldn't sit idle. She thrived on escalation, which meant I had prepared for sabotage. Sure enough, my trail cameras caught men in tactical gear, probably hired security, prowling around the dam at night. Twice, I found sandbags and concrete chunks jammed into the spillway channels. It took hours with jackhammer to clear them. I documented everything. If they wanted to turn this into a war, I was going to make sure they left fingerprints on every single crime. Meanwhile, Amanda waged financial warfare. She contacted the insurance companies backing the HOA development, supplying evidence that their flood mitigation claims were fraudulent. She tipped off state banking regulators about suspicious loan documents tied to Rick's construction company. One domino after another began to wobble, and all it would take was one push, the dam opening, to send the entire line tumbling. But this wasn't just about law and paperwork. It was about preparation in the field. I serviced the hydraulic gates on Pop's dam, oiled every joint, tested every mechanism. I ran calculations late into the night. How much water to release, at what speed, to restore the creek's natural path without causing damage. I wasn't unleashing chaos. I was orchestrating control. And as I stood there, blueprint in one hand, Pop's old journal in the other, I realized what this fight had become. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about land anymore. It was about restoring balance, putting the water back where it belonged, honoring my grandfather's legacy, and proving that one man with truth on his side could take down an empire built on lies. The battlefield was set. The storm was coming. And when those clouds broke, so would Maggie's illusion of power. The morning of the showdown felt like standing on the edge of a battlefield. The storm had rolled in overnight, thunder rumbling low and steady like distant artillery. By dawn, my driveway was crowded. Reporters with cameras, HOA supporters waving Protect Our Kids signs, and neighbors clutching umbrellas as if they were shields. Maggie, of course, was at the center of it all. She wore pearls and a tailored black dress this time, not her usual tennis whites. Her makeup was flawless, her smile rehearsed, but her eyes, they betrayed panic. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. At 6:30 a.m., federal agents arrived. Tony Riggs stepped out of the lead SUV, flashing his EPA badge. Behind him was Agent Sarah Kim, clipboard in hand, calm but watchful. Amanda met them with our files, photos, permits, water rights documents. Today isn't about flooding anyone, she explained. It's about demonstrating natural water flow. Maggie pounced before they'd even finished listening. This man is unstable, she cried, pointing at me. He's threatening to use military knowledge to terrorize families. There are children in those homes. Her voice cracked in perfect performance, and cameras zoomed in. She knew how to play an audience. But when the agents turned to me, I didn't argue. I just handed them Pop's dam permit, the federal stamp still visible after 45 years. This isn't terrorism, I said quietly. It's compliance. My grandfather built this dam under federal guidance. My family holds senior water rights. Today, I'm restoring what was stolen. The agents exchanged a look. Then they nodded. Permission granted. By 7 a.m., the crowd swelled. Maggie had busted her supporters. 30 or 40 residents holding posters, live streaming on their phones. Some were genuinely afraid. Others just wanted to protect their investments. But across the road, I saw Miguel and his family. Mrs. Chin stood with them, holding one of her black and white photos of the creek from 1947. More farmers gathered behind them, silent but resolute. Two sides, two narratives, one truth about the spill-free. I walked to the spillway controls, rain dripping off the brim of Pop's old cowboy hat. My hands hovered over the levers, heart pounding like it used to before missions overseas. Except this wasn't war, it was home. At 7:02 a.m., I pulled the first lever. The gates groaned, hydraulics hissing like a beast waking from slumber. Water surged forward, not in chaos, but in control. A steady release, timed and calculated, as the dam opened for the first time in decades. The sound wasn't violent. It was cleansing, a roar of justice. Willow Creek came alive again, rushing into its natural bed, carving through decorative rocks and artificial barriers the HOA had placed. Reporters gasped. Neighbors stepped back. Miguel dropped to his knees, cupping the flowing water in his hands, tears streaming down his face. "This is it," he whispered. "This is the water that fed my grandfather's farm." Maggie screamed, "You're flooding our homes. Arrest him." She turned to the agents, desperation cracking her polished facade. But Agent Kim shook her head calmly. "Ma'am, the water is flowing in the original creek bed. He has a legal right to operate the system." The cameras caught everything, the lies unraveling in real time. The houses Maggie swore would drown stood untouched. The only things washed away were the HOA's illegal diversions and their narrative of control. Helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live. On the evening news, it wouldn't be unstable veteran flood suburb. It would be Community Creek restored. Maggie's voice, shrill and frantic, couldn't compete with the truth rushing through that valley. By 10 a.m., the flow stabilized, exactly as I calculated. No damage, no danger, just water returning home. The agents recorded measurements, nodding in approval. Amanda smiled at me from the sidelines, a quiet pride in her eyes. And me? I just stood there, soaked in rain and spray, listening to the sound of Pop's dam, doing what it was built to do. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Maggie had her paperwork. Rick had his council votes. But I had the creek. And the creek had just spoken louder than all of them combined. By the time we stepped into the courthouse, the air was already electric. Reporters packed the hallways, farmers filled the benches, and half the town craned their necks to see if justice would finally show its face. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. It was a reckoning. Maggie arrived first, flanked by two high-priced Houston attorneys in pinstripe suits. She'd traded her pearls for a conservative black dress, playing the role of a grieving community leader. She held folders of photographs showing muddy construction sites and claimed millions in damages. Her lawyers strutted like peacocks, ready to paint me as a villain. When my turn came, Amanda and I entered quietly. No theatrics, no entourage, just a simple button-down shirt, Pop's old cowboy hat, and the truth. The gallery split like a wedding gone wrong. HOA supporters clutching "Protect Our Kids" signs on one side, farmers and neighbors with weathered faces on the other. The hearing opened with Maggie's attorney unleashing a storm of accusations. "Your Honor," he thundered, gesturing at me like I was a criminal on trial. This disturbed veteran weaponized water. He used military training to terrorize innocent families. He caused $2.7 million in flood damage. They even rolled in a so-called expert, a psychiatrist who'd never met me, who diagnosed me with combat revenge fantasies based solely on newspaper clippings. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. For a moment, it felt like their performance might stick, until Amanda stood, calm, confident, relentless. She laid Pop's 1978 dam covenant on the judge's bench. The ink faded, but the words crystal clear. Operators shall maintain natural seasonal flow patterns to preserve downstream agricultural water rights in perpetuity. Then she called EPA agent Sarah Kim to testify. Kim confirmed, under oath, that my spillway operation had restored natural creek flow without causing a single home to flood. The attorneys sputtered. Maggie's face tightened. But Amanda wasn't done. She called Tony Riggs next. In his crisp EPA uniform, Tony explained how the HOA had violated 3 federal environmental laws, committed insurance fraud, and destroyed protected wildlife habitats. Each point was backed by photographs, flow records, and eyewitness testimony. The judge shifted uncomfortably in his seat, sweat glistening on his brow. But the real turning point came when Amanda called Rick Thornwell. Under oath, he admitted to pushing zoning changes while I was overseas. He admitted his financial stake in the construction company. And when Amanda played the recording of him screaming about destroying millions in property value, the courtroom erupted. His own words had convicted him more than any lawyer could. Maggie tried one last desperate gambit. She took the stand herself, tears brimming in her eyes. "He came back from war broken, Your Honor. He's taking revenge on innocent families. He's dangerous. He's unstable." Her voice cracked like porcelain, but it was too late. Amanda called me to testify. I stood tall, holding Pop's journal, and spoke plainly. I didn't flood anyone. I restored the creek my family has protected for nearly half a century. I honor my grandfather's promise to this community. That's not revenge. That's stewardship. Silence fell. You could hear the rain pattering against the courthouse windows. Then the judge delivered his ruling. The HOA's restraining order request, denied. My spillway operation, legal and beneficial. Their interference with federal investigations, ordered to cease immediately. His final words were pointed directly at Maggie and Rick. This court will not obstruct lawful federal enforcement. As federal agents escorted Rick out in handcuffs and reporters swarmed Maggie for comment, I walked out into the daylight. The crowd of farmers and neighbors cheered, their voices echoing down Main Street. For the first time, the tide had turned. On paper, I had won. But more importantly, in the hearts of the community, justice had finally begun to flow. The storm had passed, both in the sky and in the courtroom. But what it left behind wasn't destruction. It was clarity. Maggie's empire crumbled in weeks. Rick was indicted on federal conspiracy charges. His construction company banned from government contracts. The HOA dissolved under the weight of lawsuits and unpaid fines. For all their swagger, they folded faster than rotten wood in a flood. My land was mine again, legally, permanently, indisputably. The creek flowed as it had for generations, feeding the pastures, trickling into downstream farms, and bringing life back to Mrs. Chen's garden. Miguel's cattle drank freely from his restored pond, and neighbors who'd once looked at me with suspicion now stopped by to thank me. For them, the fight wasn't just about land. It was about dignity, and the proof that one community could stand up to corruption and win. Financially, I could have cashed in. Developers circled like sharks, dangling seven-figure offers. But Pops hadn't built this land to be sold to the highest bidder. He built it to last. So I chose a different path. Together with Amanda and Tony, we established the Willow Creek Conservation Trust, a permanent buffer zone protecting the watershed from ever being exploited again. No more subdivisions. No more backroom deals. Just water, land, and people in balance. 6 months later, we held the first Creek Days Festival. Farmers, veterans, school kids, and environmentalists gathered along the restored banks. We grilled barbecue, shared stories, and raised money for a scholarship in Pop's name, supporting young students who wanted to study water management and conservation. I watched Miguel's daughter, Maria, accept the first scholarship check. She cried when she said she wanted to become an engineer to protect water, just like Mr. Morrison. That was worth more than any payout. As for me, I finally renovated Pop's farmhouse, not into a modern mansion, but into a place of honor. Solar panels on the roof, rainwater harvesting tanks by the barn, and a small study lined with Pop's old journals. Sarah moved back from California to help run our new sustainable farming co-op. Amanda and I? Well, let's just say that fighting shoulder to shoulder against corruption builds bonds deeper than most people ever know. Every Sunday, I walk down to the creek with a mason jar. I scoop up the clear, cool water, carry it to Pop's grave, and pour it gently over the soil. It flows free, Pops, I whisper, just like you said it would. And it does. It always will.